What's going on, guys? It's Michael here and welcome to FudgeMuppet. Today we not only have a brand new Fallout 4 build to share with you, but this one has been specially crafted just for an early Halloween. So get ready for our spookiest Fallout 4 build yet. This is the Scarecrow. But before we get into the build, I also have an exciting announcement that all you Fallout fans might not have heard. FudgeMuppet has officially started Twitch streaming, and it is going off. We're having awesome turnouts to the stream while playing Skyrim, but we're also going to start streaming some Fallout, be it Fallout 4 or Fallout New Vegas. We've had over 100 viewers each stream so far, and we answer almost every single question while creating some top tier memes. Our Twitch channel is linked in the description if you're keen to come hang out, so be sure to pause this video and give us a follow so we can nerd out with you live very soon. But the Scarecrow. The Scarecrow carves his victims with his butcher's hook, creating a trail of carcasses in his wake. He will creep in the shadows one moment and then go on the offensive the next, closing the distance on his helpless enemies unnaturally fast. He emerges from his cornfield with only two things on his mind: the torture and murder of everyone he finds. On top of being a horrifying presence, the Scarecrow is incredibly versatile. He is optimized for sneaking gunfire attacks and also for huge critical stealth lunges in VATS by using Blitz. You can switch between close range melee combat and ranged gunfire in seconds, and after we beef him up with endurance, you can choose to not even use stealth. If he's not gutting with his hook, he's littering his enemies with nails. But the best part of this character is his killer aesthetic. With harsh leathers and a sack covering his face, he is a walking nightmare to the people of the Commonwealth. This build is based very loosely on the DC villain named Scarecrow, but this is our interpretation of a horror build, and in many ways he's nothing like the villain from the DC universe. But before we get started, don't forget that you can find timestamps just below in the description to help you navigate throughout the video. But with that said, let's kick things off with the Scarecrow's backstory and basic values. The Scarecrow was born and raised in Maine. His parents were your run-of-the-mill middle-class couple, and his upbringing was incredibly typical. That was until one spring afternoon. The Scarecrow's parents made the most of Maine's beautiful landscapes, and often took their son out on hikes in the countryside to take in the scenery. The Scarecrow had no complaints, and he loved exploring the forests near the walking trail, and would often venture off on his own, with the one rule that he must stay within his parents' eyesight. Now, this spring afternoon was perfect. The sky was a deep blue devoid of clouds, and the sun shone brightly down on them. It was pleasantly warm, but not enough to cause a sweat. Excited as usual, the Scarecrow spent most of the hike glancing across the fields surrounding the road, and for the second half of the hike, they made their way through tall cornfields. The stalks were so high that they could have gone on forever, as far as the young boy was concerned at least. He couldn't resist the temptation to explore, and he made his way into the labyrinth of corn. He would only go 100 or so paces before turning back. He ran through the cornfield, bouncing across a soft, springy surface of flattened cobs and leaves. Just ahead of him, the cornfield seemed to clear into an opening, and the boy was certain he could hear a voice. "Dad?" he thought. Had he ran in a circle in his excitement. He pushed through the last few stalks obstructing his view, and in the center of the clearing on a large wooden post stood a tall figure. The boy's heart skipped a beat. It was a Scarecrow. That should have put him at ease, but the thing sent cold shivers down the boy's spine. The Scarecrow's face had two hollow black holes for eyes and a drooping mouth cut from a dirty old burlap sack. He avoided the straw man's eyes, edging along the clearing before pushing his way back through the maze. He wanted to find his parents. Ahead he could see another clearing in the afternoon light, only this one didn't have a Scarecrow. There, lying in the center of the clearing among stacks of black rotten corn, lay the lifeless body of a man. Carrion crows had gathered for their banquet, and they feasted on the flesh in the empty sockets where his eyes used to be. The boy's heart rammed against his chest, and his blood turned ice cold for a horrific moment. Then he was running. He ran through the cornfields, taking a battering from each branch in his path. Nothing slowed him down. He finally made it back to the road. Parked just ahead was his father's car, and there his parents both stood, panicked. The police arrived shortly after, and the boy explained what he'd found through tear-welled eyes. From this road he could see over the top of the rows of corn, and he knew that the Scarecrow's gangly form was visible from where they stood, though he refused to look. Eventually they were allowed to leave, and from the car window, under the light of dusk and the red and blue flashing of the police car, the boy looked to the Scarecrow. The Scarecrow turned to meet his gaze, and its eyes began to glow a bloody red. For many years, the boy held that memory down, deep inside the caverns of his mind. He visited the school counselor weekly, never finding the courage to speak of what he'd seen. He didn't want to be crazy. That was another of his biggest fears. Many years later, towards the end of the final year of high school, the young Scarecrow's friend invited him to go camping. Not wanting to offend one of his only friends, he reluctantly accepted. It was about time he faced his fears of the countryside. They set up camp in a tranquil, verdant meadow. It was a stark contrast to the adjacent field, an old, unkempt and wilting cornfield. The young man dealt with this the way he dealt with all of his anxieties. He averted his eyes. It was an uneventful night of drinking, s'mores and wisecracks, but this was exactly what he wanted. It was nice to relax. In the middle of their sleep, his friend stirred and left the tent to relieve his bladder. As he started his stream, he noticed a rustle in the field in front of him. The surrounding trees were full of shrieking crows. And then it emerged. A silhouette stalked his way, walking with the kind of grace a man with no bones would have. Its eyes suddenly gleamed a deep red. Our main character had awoken from the feeling of someone leaving the tent, and while this was a normal thing to occur, he felt something was awry. He climbed out of the tent and he saw it too. It had 2 giant hooks for hands, and it used them to rip his best friend to shreds 50 paces away from him. The crows gathered in the trees above raised their volume, a cacophony of high-pitched squeals. He shook uncontrollably as the figure in front of him met his gaze. He began to sprint away as fast as he could. He knew the way back to his car, and once he got in, he drove 100 miles an hour home. He never looked back as he fled, and he knew the police would never believe him. A supernatural occurrence, they would just laugh. After talking to the police, they did believe that a murder happened, but the whole supernatural monster thing was chalked up to the young adult being traumatized after seeing his friend's dead body. It is said they searched for the murderer for the next few years, but never found him. In this time, the Scarecrow, that is the Build character, vowed to leave Maine the moment he graduated high school, and he did, saying goodbye to his parents and moving to Boston, where he ended up joining the military. In the urban jungle of Boston, he was able to curb his overwhelming anxiety, and in the army, he was far too busy to think of his past. He served most of his time here before being sent home after sustaining a gunshot wound to the shoulder. He dreaded returning home, but his volunteer nurse, a woman named Nora, took his fears and sent them away, perhaps never to return. He fell in love and married her, settling in the suburbs of Boston, far from any farms. Things were peaceful like when he was a child, and he actually had a child of his own. Then, as we know, the bombs fall, and things would never be the same again. After his 3rd traumatic experience, and by far the worst he'd ever been through, losing his wife and child, the Scarecrow lost any of the courage he'd gained. All of the horrific memories he had accrued from his childhood to his teenage years to his military service were now too terrifying to face. Watching his wife die broke down his defenses, and all of his trauma manifested itself. When he emerges to the surface of the new world, the pre-war man is dead. In his place is the collection of his fears. He becomes the monster he saw in the cornfields all those years ago. The Scarecrow will kill anyone, feeding on their fear. He wants others to suffer the way he suffered, and he knows that a quick death isn't enough. He will make sure everyone he kills is sufficiently horrified before he is satisfied. In terms of factions, he will side with the Institute, as they are the scariest to the people of the Commonwealth, and he will definitely be impressed with the more unethical things they're doing. However, once he goes to Nuka World, he will side with the Raiders, choosing to side with the Disciples and the Pack. He can then use them to take over the wasteland, although do know he doesn't really care about settlements. He simply enjoys the experience of taking over in all its lunacy. He truly is a broken and twisted man. At the beginning of the game, the Scarecrow's special stats will be 10 strength, 1 perception, 1 endurance, 1 charisma, 1 intelligence, 9 agility, and 5 luck. The special book in Sean's room will go into agility, making it 10. Early in the game, stealth is a priority, as the low endurance can make open conflict quite hazardous. Later on, however, the Scarecrow will be beefed up, and you can be way less careful if you want to. Strength is a huge stat for the Scarecrow, as his primary form of attack will revolve around getting up close and personal, tearing his victims to pieces with his butcher's hook. The other primary stat is agility, and this gives you some great VATS mayhem, early and end game stealth capabilities, as well as some great offensive options for closing distances on your enemies via the Blitz perk. Then with an investment in luck, your sneak attacks as well as your criticals will allow you to take out most of your enemies in 1 or 2 hits. Bloody Mess also makes things super gory. Now that we have all of the important special stats outlined, let's take a look at the perks to take from each stat. From strength, start off with Iron Fist. With all ranks of of this, punching attacks will do double damage, criticals landed in VATs will paralyze, and unarmed power attacks may cripple or disarm your opponent. Armorer is next, and this is a must for improving your apparel. Take all ranks of this for access to all armor mods. Finally, from strength, there's rooted, and with 2 ranks of this, you'll be an absolute tank when standing still. Much like a real Scarecrow, you can scare off your targets with your imposing presence alone. While standing still, you'll gain plus 50 damage resistance and 50% bonus damage to unarmed or melee attacks. Perception isn't a big stat for the Scarecrow. His sack hood will cover his vision most of the time, but once you've got your hands on the bobblehead straight away, Rifleman is a perk that's well worth the investment. All ranks of this will make your automatic rifles twice as powerful, ignoring 25% of a target's armor. Also, there's a slight chance you'll cripple them with each hit. Endurance is another important stat for keeping you alive in fights, even though we don't actually take any perks from it. So here you should just drop 5 perk points into the base stat. Next, we have agility. As I mentioned before, this one will help out in a variety of ways. The Scarecrow can switch between stealth and aggressive combat on a whim, and with the right investment in this stat, both will be incredibly effective. Taking all ranks of Sneak and Ninja will really help your stealth game, for instance. Taking all 5 ranks of Sneak will make you 50% harder to detect, and on top of that, engaging stealth will cause distant enemies to lose you, and you won't set off any traps or mines, and you can run without affecting stealth. Then, maxing out the Ninja perk will grant you a bonus of 3.5 times normal damage for all ranged sneak attacks, and then 10 times for melee sneak attacks. An all-round great perk from agility is Action Boy, and with this fully optimized, you will regenerate those crucial action points 75% faster. And finally, we have Blitz. This one is massive. With both ranks of this, your VAT's melee distance will be increased a lot, and the further you lunge, the harder you'll hit. Our final stat is Luck, and this is where your damage output gets ridiculous. Add 1 perk point to the base stat and get Bloody Mess. With this, you'll do 15% more damage across the board, you'll get visual enhancements to all your gore, and when your enemy explodes into a bloody mess, not only will you be satisfied, but it may pass on to nearby foes. Then we have Idiot Savant, and this perk benefits from you keeping your intelligence at 1. 2 ranks of Idiot Savant will give you the random chance of receiving 5 times as much XP for any action. It helps you level super fast, even though we have low intelligence. And finally, we have the critical perks, Better Criticals, and Critical Banker. With all ranks of the former, your crits will do 2.5 times as much extra damage, and with all ranks of the latter, you can store up to 4 critical hits to use whenever you like. Have a ton of fun. Also, one really cool idea if you don't want that 4th rank of Bloody Mess is actually just to get the 1st rank of Solar Powered, so your endurance and strength are increased by +2 during the daylight hours. This will make you really strong and kind of roleplays into the whole being a Scarecrow thing. At the end of the game, the Scarecrow's special stats will be 11 strength, 2 perception, 2 endurance, 2 charisma, 1 intelligence, 11 agility, and 6 luck. As I mentioned earlier, do not increase your intelligence by getting the bobblehead, as this will mess with your Idiot Savant benefits. As for gear, the Scarecrow will be sporting one of the creepiest, most terrifying aesthetics possible. Using the following armor pieces and apparel, you'll be able to nail the horror vibes, as well as nailing limbs to walls. First off, get some Raider leathers and a sack hood with hoses. Over that, get the Disciples wrapped left arm with the Brawling mod, and get the same for the right arm. Then get the wrapped left and right leg with the Sleek mod on both. For the chest piece, get a heavy leather chest piece with the Ultralight mod. Make sure it is treated. In terms of weapons, the Butcher's Hook, fully upgraded, is the go-to melee weapon of choice, and early on you can use whatever creepy melee weapons you like, such as a switchblade, but you can easily change things up from melee altogether without sacrificing too much of your damage output. The Railway Rifle is great for killing from a distance, and you should upgrade that as much as your perks will allow you. Then for added psychopathic fun, get the Syringer Rifle fully upgraded with a glowing reflex sight. Bloatfly Lava or Berserker Syringes will make things even scarier for your victims. You can also use chems like Psycho to add to the theme, but just keep in mind that chems aren't optimized in our perks. Then if you're really feeling like it, you may want to add some of those hallucinogen grenades, as they will frenzy your enemies and disorient them in the toxic green mist. Unfortunately, there is only a limited supply of those though, so use them wisely. The Scarecrow won't be using companions. His motives and his mental state don't really make him the ideal travel companion, but if you really want a companion, the most suitable pick would have to be Strong, as he's just a bit of a monster himself. The Scarecrow is not going to bother with settlements. He wouldn't be quite as scary if his victims knew where he slept. This guy's happy to live in the fear of others, although like I said in the factions section, you can join the raiders and take over settlements if you want to. However, you don't really care about the settlements themselves. You're just in it for the thrill. Subscribe to FudgeMuppet if you're new in town, and give the video video a like if you enjoyed it. This has been our custom-made Fallout 4 build, specially designed for you to play on the spookiest day of the year, or a bit earlier, like now. Don't forget that timestamps can be found in the description with links to our Twitter and all other social media. Also in the description you can find our Twitch channel where we've already begun streaming. We'll be starting a Fallout New Vegas Let's Play very soon, so if you're keen to watch it, check out our channel and our soon-to-be-announced schedule. As always, thanks so much for watching, guys. My name's Michael, and I'll see you next time.